Hey guys, tonight we're diving into something you think you understand but absolutely don't. When you hear janitor or custodian, your mind probably goes to the friendly guy with a mop bucket, maybe whistling while he works, keeping things tidy during quiet hours when nobody's around. Hollywood sold you this image of the wise, gentle cleaner. Think of the janitor in Good Will Hunting, dispensing life advice between emptying trash cans. But let me shatter that illusion right now. The reality of working as a janitor in America is a relentless gauntlet of bodily fluids, chemical burns, impossible schedules, and a level of disrespect that would break most people's spirits before their first week is up. You're not just cleaning, you're a biohazard specialist, a crisis manager, a target for every person's worst behavior, and somehow expected to remain invisible while being absolutely essential. You wouldn't last a single day as a janitor, not because you're weak, but because nothing, and I mean nothing, can prepare you for the reality of what human beings leave behind when they think nobody's watching. The smells alone would send you running, but that's just the appetizer in this feast of workplace horror. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Chapter 1: The 3 a.m. Awakening. Your alarm screams at 3:47 a.m., not 4 a.m. like a normal human being, but 3:47 because your shift starts at 5 o'clock, and you need every precious minute to get ready for what's about to assault your senses. Your body hasn't adjusted to this schedule, it never will. Chronic sleep deprivation isn't a side effect of janitorial work, it's a job requirement. You drag yourself out of bed, your lower back already aching from yesterday's battle with industrial floor scrubbers. Your hands are cracked and dry from constant exposure to cleaning chemicals, no matter how many pairs of rubber gloves you go through. The skin around your fingernails has that permanent raw look of someone who spends their life in bleach and ammonia. You throw on clothes that you'll burn through in 6 months, not from wear, but from chemical stains and mysterious substances that never quite wash out. Most janitors learn quickly to shop at thrift stores because replacing work clothes becomes a monthly expense. Your uniform isn't provided by most companies. It's just whatever you can afford to ruin. The coffee you gulp down is more necessity than pleasure. You're about to enter an 8 to 10 hour shift of pure physical labor, often alone, in environments that would challenge a hazmat team. And here's what nobody tells you. Most janitors work multiple buildings or shifts. That 5 a.m. start, it might be your second job of the day if you're working the overnight cleaning crew at an office building. You check your phone one last time, knowing you won't have a real break for hours. Your family is still sleeping in warm beds, and you're about to descend into a world where human dignity goes to die. The worst part, you're grateful for this job because, in America, janitorial work is often the only employment available to people without college degrees, immigrants learning English, or anyone with a criminal record trying to rebuild their life. Welcome to the invisible workforce. Population: millions of people society pretends don't exist. Chapter 2: The Arsenal of Chemical Warfare. You arrive at the supply closet, if you can call it that. It's usually a cramped, poorly ventilated room that smells like a toxic waste site and a swimming pool had a baby. Here's where you'll gather the tools of your trade, and trust me, this isn't your grandmother's cleaning cabinet. Industrial strength disinfectants line metal shelves like soldiers ready for chemical warfare. Toilet bowl cleaner with hydrochloric acid that can burn through skin. All-purpose cleaners with ammonia that'll sear your lungs if you're not careful. Glass cleaners with butyl salicylic that causes headaches and dizziness. And that's just what they tell you about on the safety data sheets that nobody has time to read. Your protective equipment is whatever the company can buy in bulk for the lowest price. Thin rubber gloves that tear if you look at them wrong. Safety goggles that fog up immediately and never quite fit right. A paper mask that provides about as much protection as thoughts and prayers. OSHA has regulations about chemical safety, but enforcement in the janitorial industry is spotty at best. You load your cart, a wheeled monument to inefficiency that's older than some of your co-workers. The wheels never go in the same direction. One of them has a permanent wobble, and it's loaded with enough supplies to stock a small pharmacy. Mop buckets that haven't been properly cleaned in months. Vacuum cleaners held together with duct tape and hope. And spray bottles labeled with handwritten tags that have long since become illegible. But here's the kicker. You're responsible for this equipment. If it breaks, gets stolen, or mysteriously disappears, it's coming out of your paycheck. That industrial vacuum that costs more than you make in a month. Better guard it with your life, because the company considers you personally liable for thousands of dollars worth of equipment while paying you barely above minimum wage. The chemical mixing happens in whatever space is available, often the same utility. Sink where you'll later clean mop heads and fill buckets. Cross-contamination isn't just possible, it's inevitable. You're creating chemical cocktails that would make a Breaking Bad episode look like a cooking show. And breathing it all in because proper ventilation is a luxury most facilities can't afford. And this is just the preparation phase. You haven't even started cleaning yet. Chapter 3. Entering the battlefield. The building at 5 a.m. is a different creature than what the daytime workers experience. The lights are harsh fluorescents that buzz like angry wasps and cast everything in a sickly green pallor. The air conditioning system makes sounds that suggest it's plotting your demise. And the smells, oh, the smells. Every building has its own signature scent, and none of them are pleasant. Office buildings reek of stale coffee, microwaved fish from yesterday's lunch, and the accumulated body odor of hundreds of people in poorly ventilated spaces. Schools smell like industrial food, teenage hormones, and something that might be science experiments gone wrong. Medical facilities combine antiseptic with human suffering in ways that will haunt your dreams. You start with the bathrooms because you've learned to get the worst part over with while you still have the stomach for it. And let me be clear, nothing, absolutely nothing, prepares you for what people do in bathrooms when they think nobody's watching. You're not just dealing with normal human waste. You're dealing with what happens when people have absolutely no respect for shared spaces. Toilet paper isn't just on the floor. It's somehow stuck to the ceiling. Feminine hygiene products are abandoned in places that defy both logic and gravity. Someone has inexplicably tried to flush an entire apple down one toilet. The mirror looks like it was used as target practice by someone with dysentery. And that brown substance on the wall, you pray it's chocolate, but experience has taught you to assume the worst. The industrial strength toilet brush becomes your weapon of choice, but it's a losing battle. You scrub, you spray, you scrub again, and somehow the stains seem to mock your efforts. Your knees ache from kneeling on wet floors. Your shoulders burn from reaching and scrubbing. Your lungs feel like you've been smoking bleach cigarettes, and this is just the first bathroom. In a typical office building, you've got at least 6 more to go. In a school, maybe 20. Each one is its own unique circle of hell, and you're the janitor Dante, navigating through the levels of human grossness. But here's what really gets you. Tomorrow morning, when the regular employees arrive, They'll complain that the bathroom doesn't smell fresh enough, or that there's a water spot on the mirror. They'll never acknowledge the biological disaster you prevented them from walking into. Chapter 4. The Hierarchy of Invisible People. Let's talk about your place in the corporate food chain. You don't have one. You exist in a parallel universe where you're simultaneously essential and completely ignored. You have a badge that gets you into places after hours, but you're not allowed to use the employee parking lot during the day. You know more about the building than anyone else, but your opinion is never asked for anything. The day shift employees treat you like furniture that occasionally moves. They'll have entire conversations around you as if you're not there, discussing confidential business matters, personal problems, and office gossip while you empty their trash cans. Some are polite enough to nod, but most look right through you. You've become invisible, a ghost who cleans up after the living. Building management views you as a necessary evil, overhead that needs to be minimized. You're not an employee of the company whose building you clean. You work for a contractor who bid for the job based on who could do it cheapest. This means there's always pressure to cut corners, reduce hours, and somehow maintain impossible standards with fewer resources. Your immediate supervisor might be someone who's never actually done janitorial work, but got promoted because they could read a spreadsheet. They'll create schedules that require you to clean a 50,000 square foot building in 6 hours, including deep cleaning tasks that should take hours by themselves. When you can't meet these impossible standards, it's your fault for not being efficient enough. Safety meetings are a joke where they read from a script about lifting techniques while expecting you to move furniture that should require a team. Workers' compensation claims are discouraged with threats about job security, union representation. In most states, good luck with that. You're at-will employment, which means you can be fired for any reason or no reason at all. The day shift gets cost of living raises. You get a lecture about how cleaning services are competitive and maybe you should be grateful to have a job at all. They get health insurance that actually covers things. You get a plan with a deductible so high you'd go bankrupt before seeing any benefits. But here's the real hierarchy. You're below the people you clean up after, but you're also responsible for making their environment pleasant. You're simultaneously essential and disposable, invisible and blamed for everything. Welcome to the contradiction of being working class in America. Chapter 5. When humans become animals. Now we need to talk about what people actually do when they think nobody's watching, because this is where your faith in humanity goes to die. You'll discover that the same people who smile and say please and thank you during business hours transform into absolute barbarians the moment they think they have privacy. The break room microwave looks like someone detonated a lasagna bomb inside it. Apparently, covering food is a concept that died sometime in the 1990s. The splatter patterns on the walls suggest that someone heated up spaghetti sauce at nuclear temperatures and just walked away. The smell is a mixture of burned cheese, rotten vegetables, and broken dreams. Office workers leave coffee mugs that have developed their own ecosystems. We're talking about mold that could probably cure diseases or start pandemics. Sticky notes are stuck to every surface with mysterious brown substances. Keyboard crumbs suggest that people eat entire Thanksgiving dinners while typing emails. But it gets worse in professional settings. Lawyers' offices where the trash cans contain not just paper, but food waste that's been rotting for days because that's what the cleaning staff is for. Medical offices where the exam rooms contain bodily fluids that should legally require hazmat certification to clean. Corporate boardrooms where grown adults have food fights during late-night meetings and leave it for you to discover. The real heartbreaker is schools. Kids, you expect to be messy, but teachers and administrators, who should know better, they're often the worst offenders. faculty lounges that look like war zones, classrooms where someone spilled an entire container of glitter and just shrugged, cafeterias where the floor is so sticky your shoes make sounds like Velcro with every step. And here's the psychological warfare. These same people will complain if you move anything while cleaning. They'll leave passive-aggressive notes about touching their personal items while expecting you to clean around and under their accumulated mess. They want you to be simultaneously thorough and invisible, effective and non-intrusive. You start to realize that cleanliness isn't actually important to most people. It's just something they expect to magically happen while they're not around. They've never thought about who creates the clean environment they take for granted, and they certainly don't want to think about what it takes to maintain it. The worst part, you can't unsee any of this. Every clean surface becomes a temporary state that you know will be violated within hours of your leaving. Chapter 6. The chemical burns and body breakdown. Let's talk about what this job does to your body. Because occupational health in the janitorial industry is treated more like a suggestion than a requirement. Your hands are the first casualties. Despite wearing gloves when they're available and when they don't tear immediately, your skin becomes a canvas of chemical burns, cuts, and chronic irritation. The cleaning products you use daily would require protective equipment in any other industry, but janitors are expected to handle them with minimal protection. Toilet bowl cleaners with acid that burns through skin, oven cleaners that can cause respiratory damage, floor strippers that require ventilation you don't have access to. The safety data sheets are stored somewhere in an office you're not allowed to enter during business hours. Your respiratory system takes a beating that would impress a coal miner. You're breathing chemical vapors for 8 to 10 hours a day in poorly ventilated spaces. Ammonia burns your throat. Bleach fumes make your eyes water. The combination of different cleaning products creates chemical reactions that produce gases. Nobody's tested for long-term exposure. Chronic coughing becomes your background soundtrack. Headaches from chemical exposure are so common they become your new normal. Your sense of smell gradually deteriorates because your olfactory nerves are constantly under assault. Some janitors develop chemical sensitivities that make them react to cleaning products, even in small quantities. The physical demands destroy your musculoskeletal system piece by piece. Mopping isn't just pushing water around, you're doing repetitive motions with industrial equipment that weighs significantly more than household versions. Your shoulders, elbows, and wrists develop chronic pain from the constant twisting and reaching motions. Lifting is constant and often alone. Trash bags that exceed weight limits because people dump whatever they want. Moving furniture to clean under it. Carrying supplies up and down stairs because freight elevators are for authorized personnel only. Hernias, back injuries, and joint problems are occupational hazards that workers' compensation often disputes. Your knees are destroyed from crawling on hard floors to clean under desks and equipment. The industrial knee pads provided, if any offer, about as much protection as cardboard. By your 40s, you're walking like someone much older, and by your 50s, you're looking at potential disability from a job that society considers unskilled labor. The irony is that you're maintaining healthy environments for other people while destroying your own health in the process. The clean, safe spaces that office workers take for granted are paid for with your lung function and joint mobility. Chapter 7. The Swing Shift Nightmare. Here's something nobody tells you about janitorial work. The schedule will destroy your life, your health, and your relationships. Most cleaning happens during off hours, which means you work when the rest of the world is sleeping, eating dinner with their families, or having anything resembling a normal life. The 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift is common in office buildings. You arrive when everyone else is heading home from evening activities, and you leave when they're starting their day. Your circadian rhythm doesn't adjust, it just breaks. You're perpetually tired, never quite awake, existing in a zombie state that feels like permanent jet lag. But it gets worse when you're working multiple buildings. Your schedule might be 5 a.m. to 1 p.m. at a school, then 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. at an office building. There's no time for a real break, just enough time to drive between locations while your body screams for rest. Sleep becomes a series of naps between shifts, never long enough for proper REM cycles. Family life. What family life? Your kids are asleep when you leave for work and at school when you get home. Dinner together is a fantasy. Attending school events, helping with homework, or being present for bedtime stories becomes impossible. Your spouse becomes a single parent while you're physically present but working constantly. Social isolation is inevitable. Your friends work normal hours. When they're free for dinner or weekend activities, you're either working or desperately trying to catch up on sleep. Dating is nearly impossible. Try explaining to someone that you're available Tuesday afternoon and Sunday morning, but otherwise you're either working or unconscious. The health effects compound quickly. Shift work is linked to increased risks of heart disease, diabetes, depression, and a shortened lifespan. Your body never knows when to produce melatonin or cortisol. You eat fast food because cooking requires being awake when grocery stores are open. Exercise becomes impossible because gyms aren't open when you're free, and you're too exhausted anyway. Here's the cruelest part. Many janitors work multiple part-time jobs because companies structure positions to avoid paying benefits. You might work 35 hours a week at 3 different locations, never qualifying for health insurance anywhere, while working more total hours than full-time employees who get weekends off. The scheduling is also unpredictable. Sick calls mean you're forced to work double shifts with no notice. Holiday schedules change without warning. Building emergencies become your emergencies, even when you're supposed to be off duty. Chapter 8. Biohazard Specialist without the training. Let's discuss the biological realities that nobody warns you about when you take a janitorial job. You're not just cleaning dirt and dust. You're dealing with biohazards that would require specialized training and equipment in any other context. But in the janitorial world, you're expected to handle it with paper towels and prayers. Blood is surprisingly common in office buildings, nosebleeds in conference rooms, cuts from paper that people just let drip on carpets, medical offices where proper disposal protocols are suggestions rather than requirements. You're cleaning up human blood with household-grade disinfectants and hoping that universal precautions are actually universal. Vomit happens more than you'd expect, especially in schools and restaurants. But here's what they don't teach you. Different surfaces require different cleanup techniques, and the smell will embed itself in your nasal passages for days. The industrial-strength odor eliminator you're given mostly just adds chemical smell on top of biological smell, creating new levels of olfactory hell. Fecal matter isn't confined to bathrooms in the nightmarish world of professional cleaning. Office buildings where someone had an accident and tried to clean it themselves, spreading contamination across multiple surfaces. Daycare centers where proper sanitation is impossible with the staff-to-child ratios they maintain. Medical facilities where the definition of contained is more optimistic than accurate. Urine finds its way into places that defy logic and physics. Carpeted areas that have been used as bathrooms for months before anyone reported it. Stairwells in parking garages that have become unofficial restrooms for people who don't want to walk to actual facilities. The ammonia smell burns your throat and clings to your clothes no matter how much you wash them. Needles are terrifyingly common, even in buildings where they shouldn't exist. Office workers who inject insulin and dispose of needles in regular trash. Drug users who treat utility closets as private injection sites. Medical facilities where sharps containers are suggestions rather than requirements. You're handling trash bags that could contain HIV, hepatitis, or worse, with protection that wouldn't qualify for handling broken glass. Bodily fluids combine and ferment in ways that create new categories of biological hazard. Trash cans that haven't been emptied properly become bacterial breeding grounds. Ventilation systems that circulate contaminated air throughout buildings. Carpets that act as sponges for every biological spill over decades. The real horror is that you're not trained for any of this. Basic janitorial training covers how to mop floors and empty trash cans. Bloodborne pathogen training is often a 10-minute video that's more about legal liability than actual safety. You learn to handle biohazards through trial and error, usually while being exposed to them. Chapter 9. The Economics of Exploitation. Now, let's talk about money. Because the financial reality of janitorial work is a masterclass in how American capitalism exploits essential workers. The median wage for janitors in the United States is $12.82 per hour. That sounds almost reasonable until you realize that most positions are part-time, without benefits, and require you to work multiple jobs to approach a living wage. Your $12.82 per hour assumes you get consistent hours, which you don't. Cleaning schedules fluctuate based on building occupancy, budget cuts, and seasonal variations. Summer months might mean reduced hours when office buildings have fewer occupants. Holiday seasons mean increased work for the same pay. You're constantly calculating whether you can afford rent this month based on variable income. Health insurance. That's hilarious. Most janitorial companies structure employment to keep workers under the threshold for mandatory benefits. You might work 35 hours a week across multiple sites, never qualifying as full-time anywhere. The health insurance that is offered often has deductibles so high that you'd go bankrupt before receiving any actual care. Workers' compensation is a battlefield where companies fight every claim. That back injury from lifting industrial equipment, they'll argue it was pre-existing. Chemical burns from cleaning products must be from something you did at home. The respiratory problems from constant chemical exposure, probably your smoking habit, even if you've never smoked. Paid time off is virtually non-existent. Sick days mean lost wages, which means you work while ill, spreading infections through buildings full of people. Vacation time accrues so slowly that taking a week off requires months of planning and financial sacrifice. Personal days for family emergencies, medical appointments, or basic life maintenance come out of your grocery budget. The equipment costs are passed down to workers in creative ways. Uniforms aren't provided, but are required to meet company standards. Steel-toed boots for safety are mandatory, but not reimbursed. When industrial equipment breaks from normal use, workers are often held financially responsible for replacement costs that exceed their monthly wages. Transportation between multiple job sites eats into your wages. Gas, vehicle maintenance, and time spent driving between buildings are your responsibility. Some companies assign you to buildings across town from each other, making it impossible to work efficiently while burning through your paycheck in fuel costs. Here's the real economic trap. Janitorial work is often the only employment available to people with criminal records, immigrants learning English, or workers without college degrees. Companies know this and structure compensation accordingly. You're not just competing against other workers. You're competing against people who are desperate enough to accept any wages offered. The math is brutal. After taxes, transportation, equipment costs, and unpaid time between jobs, your effective hourly wage might be closer to $8 to $9 per hour. Try paying rent, utilities, food, and healthcare on that while working 50 to 60 hours a week across multiple positions. Chapter 10. The Mental Health Meltdown. Working as a janitor doesn't just destroy your body and your bank account. It systematically dismantles your mental health in ways the therapists struggle to understand, because they've never experienced this level of sustained dehumanization. You're invisible when convenient and blamed when anything goes wrong. This psychological contradiction creates a form of workplace trauma that's rarely acknowledged or addressed. The constant exposure to human waste and biological hazards triggers a form of disgust, sensitivity that never turns off. You can't unsee the things you've cleaned, can't unknow what people do when they think nobody's watching. Your brain starts categorizing humans differently, not as individuals with dignity, but as sources of mess and contamination. This protective mechanism helps you do the job, but isolates you from normal social interactions. Respect is something you watch other people receive, while being treated as part of the building infrastructure. Executives walk past you without acknowledgement while discussing multi-million-dollar deals. Teachers ignore you while lecturing about treating people with kindness. Medical professionals who should understand occupational health hazards treat you like you're contaminating their space just by existing. The sleep deprivation from shift work creates a constant state of cognitive impairment, similar to being drunk. Your decision-making suffers. Your emotional regulation breaks down. Simple problems become overwhelming because your brain never gets proper rest cycles. You're perpetually operating in crisis mode, which your nervous system interprets as constant danger. Chemical exposure affects brain function in ways that are poorly understood and rarely studied in janitorial workers. Chronic headaches become background noise. Memory problems develop gradually. You can't remember if you locked the door or turned off equipment because chemical fog clouds your thinking. Concentration becomes nearly impossible when you're breathing industrial solvents for hours daily. The financial stress compounds everything else. You're working constantly but never getting ahead. Every unexpected expense, car repair, medical bill, family emergency, becomes a crisis that takes months to recover from. The mental energy required to constantly calculate whether you can afford basic necessities is exhausting in ways that people with stable incomes can't understand. Social isolation intensifies the mental health impacts. Your work schedule makes normal relationships impossible. Your income makes social activities unaffordable. Your job makes you feel ashamed in social situations because people look down on cleaning work while depending on it completely. You become disconnected from community, family, and friends through circumstances beyond your control. Depression isn't just common among janitors, it's almost inevitable. You're performing essential work that keeps society functioning while being treated as disposable. The cognitive dissonance between your importance and your treatment creates a form of existential crisis. You matter enough to clean up after everyone else, but not enough to receive basic respect or fair compensation. The worst part is that mental health treatment is financially and practically impossible. Therapy appointments during business hours conflict with sleep schedules for night shift workers. The cost of mental health care is prohibitive for someone earning minimum wage without benefits, even if treatment were accessible. How do you explain to a therapist that your depression comes from being systematically dehumanized by an entire economic system? Chapter 11. The Surveillance State. Welcome to the most Orwellian aspect of modern janitorial work. You're constantly monitored, tracked, and surveilled while being paid poverty wages to clean up after people who have actual privacy rights. Technology has turned cleaning work into a dystopian nightmare where every movement is recorded and every action is scrutinized. Badge access systems track when you enter and exit every room. Not for security, for productivity, measurement. Supervisors know exactly how long you spent in each bathroom, each office, each closet. They can tell if you took a bathroom break that exceeded the allotted time, if you spent too long cleaning one area, or if you deviated from the predetermined route through the building. Security cameras aren't just in public areas anymore. They're in storage closets, utility rooms, and anywhere janitors work. Every motion is recorded and can be reviewed if productivity metrics don't meet standards. You're performing private functions, changing clothes, eating lunch, taking medication under constant surveillance, while the people you clean up after enjoy privacy rights you don't have. GPS tracking on company vehicles monitors your route between buildings, your speed, how long you idle, and whether you make any unauthorized stops. Bathroom breaks become carefully calculated risks because stopping for 5 minutes might trigger a supervisor phone call asking why you're not moving toward the next location. Productivity software tracks how many rooms you've badged into per hour, compares your times against other workers, and flags any deviations from expected patterns. If the system shows you spent 12 minutes in a bathroom instead of 10, you'll get a message asking to explain the discrepancy. The irony is that the actual cleanliness of the space is less important than the data points showing you were there for the correct amount of time. Quality inspections happen at random times using detailed checklists that often contradict each other. One inspector wants trash cans to be positioned exactly against walls. Another wants them pulled out for easy access. One supervisor demands all chairs to be pushed under desks. Another wants them left wherever people placed them. You're judged against standards that change based on who's doing the evaluation. Customer complaint systems allow building occupants to report cleaning issues directly to supervisors without talking to you. Someone doesn't like how their desk was cleaned. That's a formal complaint in your file. A bathroom doesn't smell the way someone prefers. Another mark against your performance. These systems bypass any opportunity for you to address concerns directly or explain circumstances. The psychological impact of constant surveillance is documented in other industries but ignored in janitorial work. You develop hypervigilance, constantly aware that you're being watched and judged. Your natural work rhythm gets disrupted as you focus more on performing for cameras than on actually cleaning effectively. The stress of constant monitoring adds another layer to an already difficult job. Here's the cruelest irony. All this surveillance technology costs more than what it would cost to pay janitors decent wages. Companies will spend thousands on tracking systems to ensure minimum wage workers are productive. Enough, but won't spend that money on wages that might motivate better performance through actual respect and compensation. Chapter 12. When society crumbles around you, as your shift winds down in the pre-dawn darkness, you realize you've spent another night as a witness to decay, not just physical dirt and grime, but the moral and social decay of a society that has completely lost sight of human dignity. You've cleaned up after people who wouldn't acknowledge your existence if you were on fire. In buildings owned by corporations that view you as a line item to be minimized, the emptied trash cans and mopped floors will be dirty again within hours of the building opening. The bathrooms you scrubbed will be violated by the first person who walks in. The careful work you've done to create a clean, safe environment will be taken for granted by people who've never thought about what it takes to maintain the spaces they occupy. You clock out knowing that your work is essential. Buildings can't function without cleaning, but that you're treated as disposable. Essential enough to keep society running, but not essential enough to receive a living wage, health benefits, or basic respect. The contradiction defines your existence in ways that management, consultants, and policymakers will never understand. Your body aches in places you didn't know could ache. Your lungs burn from chemical exposure. Your hands are cracked and raw despite protective equipment that doesn't actually protect. You're heading home while other people are starting their days in the clean environment you created, and they'll never know your name or acknowledge your contribution. The drive home in the early morning light takes. You passed coffee shops where people with office jobs are buying $6 lattes, more than you make in an hour, while complaining about their work stress. You pass construction sites where workers get union wages and safety protections that janitors can only dream of. You see school crossing guards who work fewer hours for better pay because their work is considered more skilled than maintaining healthy environments for thousands of people. You arrive home to a family that's just waking up, 2 children who need help getting ready for school, to a life that needs your attention when you're finally off work. But you're not really off work. You're just between shifts, grabbing a few hours of rest before you have to do it all again tonight, and tomorrow night, and the night after that. The real tragedy isn't just the poor pay or the health hazards or the lack of respect. It's that janitorial work has become a trap rather than a stepping stone. Companies structure employment to prevent advancement. Skills you develop cleaning industrial facilities don't transfer to other jobs because they're not recognized as skills. Experience doesn't lead to better positions because there are no better positions. Just more of the same in different buildings. But here's what society doesn't want to acknowledge. You keep showing up. Despite poverty wages, health risks, and systematic dehumanization, millions of janitors across America keep buildings functional and safe. You maintain the infrastructure that allows everyone else to focus on their more important work. You're the invisible foundation that keeps society from collapsing into filth and chaos. The buildings you clean will outlast your career and probably your life. The systems you maintain will continue long after your body gives out from the physical demands. But the clean, safe environments you create every night make everything else possible. Business deals, education, healthcare, social gatherings. None of it happens without the work you do in the shadows. Chapter 13. The toxic culture of unskilled labor. But let's dig deeper into something that really burns, the deliberate classification of janitorial work as unskilled labor. This isn't just insulting terminology. It's economic warfare disguised as job categorization. The moment society labels your work as unskilled, it becomes socially acceptable to pay you poverty wages, deny you benefits, and treat you as replaceable machinery rather than a human being with expertise. Think about what janitors actually do. They're chemists who understand how different cleaning compounds interact with various surfaces. They're equipment operators managing industrial machines worth tens of thousands of dollars. They're project managers coordinating cleaning schedules across multiple buildings. They're safety specialists handling biohazards and chemical waste. They're maintenance technicians troubleshooting problems with building systems. But here's the genius of the unskilled label. It makes all of that invisible. Suddenly, knowing which chemical will strip wax without damaging the underlying floor isn't chemistry. It's just mopping. Understanding how to operate a 300-pound floor buffer without destroying furniture isn't equipment operation. It's just cleaning. Managing time across 6 different buildings with different requirements isn't project management. It's just following orders. The educational requirements reinforce this mythology. Job postings say no experience necessary while expecting workers to immediately handle industrial equipment, hazardous chemicals, and complex cleaning protocols. The training period is usually 1 day, just long enough to avoid liability if you get injured, not long enough to actually master the skills required. Then when productivity doesn't meet impossible standards, workers are blamed for not being motivated enough. Professional development, career advancement. These concepts don't exist in the janitorial world. You might work for the same company for 20 years and still be doing exactly the same job for exactly the same pay. The career ladder has been removed entirely. There's no path from janitor to supervisor, from crew member to manager, from part-time to full-time with benefits. You're locked into a permanent underclass by design. The cultural messaging around cleaning work reinforces its low status at every level. Parents tell their children to study hard or you'll end up cleaning toilets for a living. Guidance counselors never mention janitorial work as a viable career option. Media representations show janitors as either comic relief or wise but humble servants who find fulfillment in serving others, rather than in fair compensation. Educational institutions perpetuate this by streaming students away from vocational work and toward college preparation, even when many students might thrive in skilled trades. But janitorial work isn't even considered a skilled trade. It's classified as service work, which is treated as temporary employment for people between real jobs rather than legitimate career choice. The psychological impact of working in a job that society has decided requires no skill is devastating. You develop expertise, solve complex problems, and maintain critical infrastructure. But everyone treats your work as something any random person could do. This creates a form of imposter syndrome. In reverse, you know your work requires skill and knowledge, but everyone tells you it doesn't. Union organizing becomes nearly impossible when workers are convinced they're easily replaceable. Why fight for better conditions when society has told you that literally anyone could do your job? The unskilled classification becomes a tool for preventing collective action by convincing workers they have no leverage and no value. But here's what the unskilled myth really accomplishes. It allows profitable companies to extract maximum value from essential workers while paying them minimum wages. If cleaning work required acknowledged skill, companies would have to compete for workers through better compensation. By maintaining the fiction that anyone can do it, they keep wages artificially low while demanding increasingly high productivity standards. Chapter 14. The Health Insurance Nightmare. Now let's talk about something that will really make your blood boil: the healthcare situation for janitors, which is a masterclass in American cruelty disguised as employment policy. Remember, these are the people maintaining sanitary environments for everyone else while being denied access to healthcare themselves. The irony would be funny if it weren't literally killing people. Most janitorial companies structure employment specifically to avoid providing health insurance. They keep workers at 29 hours per week to stay under the Affordable Care Act requirement for employer-provided coverage. But of course, you can't live on 29 hours at $12 per hour, so you're forced to work multiple part-time jobs, none of which provide benefits. You're working 50 to 60 hours a week total while qualifying for health insurance nowhere. The health insurance that is offered through some companies is basically a cruel joke. Monthly premiums might be $300 to $400 for family coverage, more than a week's wages after taxes. Deductibles run $5,000 to $8,000 per year, meaning you have to spend more than half your annual income on medical expenses before insurance pays for anything. For people earning $25,000 per year, this isn't health insurance. It's a monthly subscription to bankruptcy. Emergency room visits become your primary care because you can't afford to see actual doctors. That chronic cough from chemical exposure, You'll treat it with over-the-counter medications until it becomes pneumonia serious enough to require emergency treatment. Those back problems from lifting industrial equipment. You'll work through the pain until something actually ruptures and you need emergency surgery. The cruel irony is that janitors are constantly exposed to health hazards that require regular medical monitoring. Chemical exposure should be tracked with periodic blood tests and lung function exams. Repetitive stress injuries need early intervention to prevent permanent damage. Infectious disease exposure requires vaccination and health screening. But the people most in need of preventive health care are the least likely to have access to it. Workers' compensation becomes a battlefield where companies fight every claim with teams of lawyers. That herniated disc from moving industrial equipment, the company will argue it was caused by something you did at home. Chemical burns from cleaning products must be from your personal activities. Respiratory problems from constant exposure to industrial solvents, probably pre-existing conditions. You're fighting billion-dollar corporations with free legal clinics while trying to work through injuries that are preventing you from working effectively. Prescription medications become impossible to afford without insurance coverage. Asthma inhalers for people with chemically damaged lungs cost $300 to $400 without insurance. Anti-inflammatory medications for joint damage from repetitive work run $100 to $200 per month. Workers end up choosing between medications they need and rent money, often going without treatment for preventable conditions. Mental health care is completely out of reach. Depression and anxiety from constant stress, sleep deprivation, and social isolation require professional treatment that costs $100 to $200 per session without insurance. The people doing some of the most psychologically damaging work in America have the least access to mental health support. They're maintaining everyone else's environment while their own mental health deteriorates from circumstances beyond their control. Dental care becomes a luxury that most janitors can't afford. Those chemical burns in your mouth from cleaning product exposure, that'll be $200 for a basic exam before any treatment. Teeth damaged from grinding during sleep deprivation and stress. Thousands of dollars for treatment that isn't covered by basic insurance plans. Many janitors end up with serious dental problems that affect their nutrition and overall health because they can't afford preventive care. The most devastating aspect is that janitors are keeping healthcare facilities clean and safe while being unable to access healthcare themselves. They're sanitizing hospitals, medical offices, and clinics where they could never afford to be patients. They're preventing disease outbreaks in medical facilities while going untreated for occupational diseases caused by their cleaning work. Family coverage becomes completely impossible on janitorial wages. Even if you could somehow afford the premiums, the deductibles and co-pays make actual healthcare usage financially ruinous. Families go without preventive care, medications, and treatment for chronic conditions because even having insurance doesn't make healthcare affordable on poverty wages. Chapter 15. The Corporate Extraction Machine. Let's examine the business model that makes all of this exploitation possible. Because understanding how cleaning companies extract profit from poverty wages will make you furious about capitalism in ways you never imagined. This isn't just about low wages. It's about systematic wealth extraction from the most vulnerable workers in America. Cleaning companies operate on a bidding system where contracts go to whoever can clean buildings for the lowest cost. This creates a race to the bottom where companies compete by cutting labor costs rather than improving quality or working conditions. The company that can squeeze the most work out of the cheapest labor wins the contract, creating incentives for exploitation at every level. Here's how the numbers work. A typical office building cleaning contract might be worth $50,000 per month. The winning company will bid around $35,000, promising to clean the building with impossible efficiency. They'll then structure employment to spend maybe $20,000 on actual labor costs, leaving $15,000 for equipment, supplies, overhead, and profit. That $15,000 profit margin comes directly from paying workers poverty wages and providing minimal benefits. Subcontracting layers add additional profit extraction at each level. The main contract holder takes their cut, then subcontracts to smaller companies who take their cut, who might subcontract to individual independent contractors who have no labor protections at all. Each layer extracts profit while the actual workers receive a smaller percentage of the contract value. You might be cleaning a building under a $50,000 monthly contract while earning $2,000 per month for doing the work. Equipment leasing becomes another profit center at workers' expense. Instead of providing cleaning equipment, companies lease it back to workers or charge them for equipment failures. That industrial vacuum that breaks down monthly. Workers might be responsible for $500 repair costs on a machine that costs the company $50 to fix wholesale. Equipment designed to last decades is replaced annually, with replacement costs passed to workers as equipment management fees. Supply costs are marked up dramatically when sold to workers. Cleaning chemicals that cost $5 wholesale are charged to workers at $25. Uniforms that cost $10 to manufacture are mandatory. Purchases at $75 each. Safety equipment required by law becomes a profit center, with companies charging workers retail prices for wholesale protective gear. The scheduling manipulation maximizes profit extraction through unpaid time. Workers might be scheduled for buildings across town from each other with 30 minutes between shifts. That travel time is unpaid, but the company can bill clients for overlapping coverage times. Workers absorb transportation costs and time, while companies charge clients as if they're providing seamless service. Training costs are minimized to maximize profit margins. Then workers are blamed for productivity problems, instead of providing proper training on industrial equipment and chemical safety. Companies offer one-day orientations that barely cover legal liability requirements. When workers can't meet impossible productivity standards or make mistakes with equipment they weren't properly trained to use, they're fired and replaced rather than properly trained. Benefit avoidance strategies are deliberately designed to increase profit margins. Companies structure employment to avoid paying for health insurance, workers' compensation, unemployment insurance, and social security contributions. They classify workers as independent contractors when possible, transferring all business expenses and risks to workers, while maintaining control over their work schedules and methods. The most insidious aspect is how cleaning companies market their labor practices to clients. They advertise cost-effective solutions and streamlined operations without mentioning that these efficiencies come from paying poverty wages and denying benefits. Clients can feel good about their clean buildings without confronting the human cost of maintaining those environments. Quality control becomes another profit extraction mechanism. Companies institute elaborate inspection systems that allow them to dock pay for substandard performance. Subjective quality metrics become tools for reducing labor costs after work is completed. Workers might clean a building thoroughly but lose pay because an inspector decided the trash cans weren't positioned exactly correct, or the water spots on mirrors weren't completely eliminated. Chapter 16. The Immigration and Exploitation Pipeline. Now we need to address something that makes this entire system even more sinister: how the janitorial industry deliberately exploits immigrant workers and people with criminal records who have limited employment options. This isn't accidental. It's a calculated business strategy that depends on vulnerable populations who can't advocate for better conditions. Undocumented immigrants make up a significant percentage of janitorial workers, and companies know this. They don't ask too many questions about documentation during hiring, because desperate workers accept lower wages and worse conditions. These workers can't report safety violations, wage theft, or workplace abuse because they risk deportation. Companies have essentially created a captive workforce that can't seek legal protection or alternative employment. The E-Verify system is selectively enforced, with companies using it as a threat rather than a genuine verification tool. Workers might be employed for months or years, until they try to organize for better conditions or file workers' compensation claims. Suddenly, their documentation becomes an issue and they're terminated for immigration status that was acceptable when they were working for poverty wages without complaints. People with criminal records face similar exploitation because janitorial work is often the only employment available to them. Companies use background checks as leverage to keep wages low and working conditions poor. Workers who have served their time and are trying to rebuild their lives are trapped in poverty wage jobs because other employers won't hire them, and cleaning companies know they have no alternatives. Language barriers are exploited to prevent workers from understanding their rights or accessing resources. Safety training is provided in English only, even when the workforce is primarily Spanish-speaking. Workers can't understand safety data sheets for chemicals they're required to use daily. They can't read wage statements to identify payroll theft. They can't navigate workers' compensation systems when they're injured on the job. Documentation requirements become tools for wage theft. Workers might be told they need social security cards or specific identification to receive paychecks, then have wages withheld for weeks while they try to obtain documents. Companies use bureaucratic requirements to create unpaid waiting periods, essentially forcing workers to provide free labor while their paperwork is processed. Union organizing becomes nearly impossible. When workers fear deportation or reincarceration more than they fear workplace exploitation, companies don't have to actively threaten workers. The implicit threat of calling immigration authorities or reporting parole violations is enough to prevent collective action. Workers know that standing up for their rights could result in losing not just their job, but their freedom or their ability to remain in the country. Wage theft is rampant because vulnerable workers can't seek legal recourse. Over time, pay is calculated differently through complex formulas that always favor the company. Pay periods are manipulated to avoid overtime requirements. Workers are misclassified as independent contractors to avoid payroll taxes and labor protections. Paychecks are delayed or partial with explanations that workers can't verify or challenge. Training and advancement opportunities are deliberately withheld from immigrant workers and people with criminal records. Companies maintain that these workers are temporary even when they've been employed for years. They're excluded from supervisor training, equipment, certification programs, or advancement opportunities that might lead to better wages. This keeps them trapped in entry-level positions, regardless of their experience or capability. Housing exploitation often accompanies employment exploitation. Some companies provide or arrange housing for immigrant workers, then deduct rent, utilities, and living expenses from wages at inflated rates. Workers end up paying more for substandard housing than they would in the regular rental market. But they can't access alternative housing without credit history, documentation, or sufficient income. The psychological impact is devastating. Workers who came to America seeking opportunity or who are trying to rebuild their lives after incarceration find themselves trapped in systems designed to extract maximum labor for minimum compensation. They're essential to maintaining clean, safe environments for other people, while being denied the dignity and security that should come with honest work. Chapter 17: The Equipment and Chemical Russian Roulette. Let's talk about the tools of the trade, because the equipment and chemicals that janitors use daily would require specialized training and safety certification in any rational workplace safety system. Instead, you're handed industrial-grade machines and toxic chemicals with about as much training as you'd get for operating a microwave, then held responsible when things go wrong. The floor buffer is your first encounter with equipment that could easily kill you. These machines weigh 300 to 400 pounds, spin at high speeds, and can drag an inexperienced operator across a room and into walls, furniture, or other people. The training consists of someone showing you the on-off switch and telling you to keep it moving. No instruction on balance, no practice time, no explanation of how different pad types affect machine behavior. Industrial vacuum cleaners aren't the household machines you're familiar with. They're backpack units that weigh 30 to 40 pounds when full, putting constant strain on your shoulders and spine. The suction is powerful enough to pull up loose carpeting, small objects, or anything that shouldn't be vacuumed. The noise level requires hearing protection that's rarely provided. You'll develop chronic back problems and hearing damage from equipment designed for efficiency rather than user safety. Carpet cleaning machines combine scalding water, industrial chemicals, and high-pressure systems in ways that create multiple hazards simultaneously. The water temperature can cause severe burns if splashed on skin. The extraction chemicals can cause respiratory damage if inhaled. The electrical systems can short out if water connections fail. You're operating hazardous equipment in wet conditions while moving quickly to meet productivity requirements. Chemical mixing becomes a daily chemistry experiment where mistakes can hospitalize you. Ammonia-based glass cleaners mixed with bleach-based toilet cleaners create chlorine gas that can kill you in an enclosed space. The safety data sheets that explain these interactions are locked in supervisor offices that you can't access during working hours. You learn about dangerous chemical combinations through trial and error, hopefully before you poison yourself. Dilution ratios for industrial cleaning chemicals are critical for both effectiveness and safety, but measuring tools are rarely provided. You're expected to estimate proper ratios by eye, leading to either ineffective cleaning that gets you in trouble with supervisors or overly concentrated solutions that cause chemical burns and respiratory damage. The margin for error is narrow, and the consequences of mistakes are serious. Personal protective equipment is theoretical rather than practical. The safety goggles fog up immediately and don't fit properly. The rubber gloves tear within minutes of contact with industrial chemicals. The dust masks provide minimal protection against chemical vapors, but are presented as adequate safety equipment. You're required to use hazardous chemicals daily, while being provided protection that wouldn't qualify for handling household cleaning products. Electrical safety is ignored entirely in wet cleaning environments. You're operating electrical equipment while handling water, using extension cords that aren't rated for wet conditions, and plugging into outlets that may not be properly grounded. Electrocution risks are constant, especially when cleaning around water sources like bathrooms and kitchen areas. Equipment maintenance is deferred until machines become dangerous to operate. Vacuum cleaners with frayed electrical cords that spark during use. Floor buffers with worn bearings that make them unpredictable and hard to control. Chemical applicators with clogged spray patterns that force you to work closer to hazardous substances. You're expected to use malfunctioning equipment because replacement costs are considered too expensive. Height safety equipment is minimal or non-existent for tasks that require climbing, cleaning high windows, replacing light fixtures, or accessing elevated storage areas. Often involves improvised solutions, like standing on chairs or using ladders that don't meet safety standards. Fall protection equipment isn't provided because tasks are classified as occasional rather than regular job duties. The most dangerous aspect is that you're held personally responsible for equipment damage while having no control over maintenance schedules or replacement decisions. That floor buffer that became dangerous due to deferred maintenance. You'll be blamed if it damages property or injures someone. The chemical dilution system that doesn't work properly. You'll be fired if cleaning quality suffers. The safety equipment that doesn't actually provide protection. You'll be cited for not using it properly if you're injured. Chapter 18. The scheduling warfare. The scheduling in janitorial work isn't just inconvenient, it's a weapon used to prevent workers from organizing, accessing benefits, or having any semblance of work-life balance. Companies have turned schedule manipulation into an art form that maximizes their flexibility while destroying workers' lives. And it's all perfectly legal under current labor laws. Split shifts are designed to give companies maximum coverage, while paying workers for minimum hours. Your schedule might be 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. at one location, then 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. at another building. You're working 8 hours, but it's spread across 17 hours of your day, making it impossible to have a second job or maintain any kind of normal routine. The time between shifts is unpaid, but you can't really do anything productive with 3 to 4 hour gaps. On-call scheduling means you're essentially at the company's disposal 24/7, while being guaranteed nothing. You might get a call at 10 p.m. telling you to be at work by 11 p.m. because someone called in sick. Refusing the call-in puts your regular hours at risk because companies view availability as more important than the hours you're actually scheduled to work. You can't make plans, can't sleep soundly, and can't have any predictability in your life. Our manipulation keeps workers just under thresholds for benefits while maximizing their availability. You might be scheduled for 39 hours one week, 25 hours the next, and 32 hours the following week. The averaging prevents you from qualifying for full-time benefits while ensuring you can't seek additional employment. Because your schedule is unpredictable. Companies get maximum flexibility while workers get maximum insecurity. Building emergencies become your emergencies regardless of your scheduled hours. Plumbing failures, heating problems, or security issues that require cleaning support can result in mandatory overtime with minimal notice. You might finish your regular shift at 6 p.m. only to get called back at 10 p.m. for an emergency that could have been handled during regular hours with proper planning. Holiday scheduling is particularly cruel because holidays are when buildings need the most cleaning, but workers want time with their families. You'll work Christmas Eve, New Year's Day, and Thanksgiving while office workers enjoy paid holidays. The increased workload from holiday parties and events means longer hours during times when you most want to be home. Often at regular pay rates because holiday premiums aren't provided. Weather emergencies create scheduling chaos that always favors company needs over worker safety. Blizzards, ice storms, and flooding create building maintenance emergencies. But workers are expected to travel to work in dangerous conditions. The same storm that closes schools and government offices becomes a reason for mandatory overtime in janitorial work. Your safety is less important than building maintenance schedules. Vacation time accrues so slowly that taking time off requires months of advanced planning and financial sacrifice. You might earn 1 hour of vacation time for every 40 hours worked, meaning a week-long vacation requires nearly a year of accumulation. During that accumulation period, any sick days or emergency time off comes out of your vacation balance, ensuring you never actually accumulate enough time for real rest. Schedule changes happen with minimal notice and maximum disruption to workers' lives. Your regular building might lose its contract, requiring you to travel to a different location across town. Your shift times might change because the client requested different cleaning hours. Your days off might be moved because someone else requested schedule changes. You adapt to company needs while having no input into decisions that affect your entire life. Seniority systems that exist in other industries are absent in janitorial work. New workers get the same consideration as employees who've worked for companies for years. Schedule preferences, building assignments, and shift selections aren't based on experience or tenure. This prevents workers from earning better schedules through loyalty and hard work, keeping everyone equally desperate and replaceable. The psychological warfare of unpredictable scheduling creates constant stress that affects every aspect of life. You can't maintain consistent sleep patterns when your start times vary by hours from day to day. You can't plan medical appointments, family activities, or social connections when your schedule changes weekly. The uncertainty creates anxiety that compounds the physical demands of the work. Chapter 19. The disability and injury cycle. Working as a janitor doesn't just risk injury, it virtually guarantees progressive physical breakdown that will eventually force you out of the workforce entirely. The combination of repetitive motions, heavy lifting, chemical exposure, and inadequate safety equipment creates a cycle of injury and disability that companies consider a normal cost of doing business rather than a problem to solve. Back injuries are so common among janitors that they're considered an occupational inevitability rather than a preventable workplace hazard. The constant bending, twisting, and lifting required for cleaning work puts enormous stress on spinal discs and muscles. Vacuum cleaners, mop buckets, and industrial equipment require repetitive motions that gradually damage soft tissues. By your 40s, chronic pain becomes your constant companion. Shoulder and wrist injuries develop from the repetitive motions required for mopping, scrubbing, and operating equipment. The industrial mop heads weigh significantly more than household versions, and wringing them out requires force that gradually damages joint structures. Carpet cleaning equipment vibrates constantly, creating repetitive stress injuries in hands and arms. Reaching overhead to clean high surfaces strains shoulder joints that weren't designed for constant elevation. Chemical exposure creates long-term health problems that develop gradually and are difficult to prove as work-related. Respiratory damage from constant inhalation of cleaning vapors might take years to become obvious, but once lung capacity is reduced, it doesn't recover. Skin sensitization from chemical contact can develop into allergic reactions that make handling any cleaning products impossible, effectively ending your ability to work in the industry. Joint problems develop from working on hard surfaces without proper protective equipment. Cleaning requires spending hours on concrete floors that destroy knee and ankle joints. The industrial knee pads provided offer minimal protection and often don't fit properly. Hip problems develop from the asymmetrical movements required for mopping and the constant weight shifting needed to operate heavy equipment. Hearing damage accumulates from daily exposure to industrial equipment noise. Vacuum cleaners, floor buffers, and air handling systems create noise levels that require hearing protection, but it's rarely provided or enforced. The gradual hearing loss affects your ability to detect equipment problems, communicate with co-workers, and function in normal social environments outside of work. Vision problems develop from chemical exposure and poor lighting conditions. Many cleaning chemicals can cause eye damage through direct contact or vapor exposure. The fluorescent lighting in most commercial buildings creates eye strain that's compounded by the visual demands of detailed cleaning work. Safety goggles that fog up or don't fit properly provide inadequate protection while making it difficult to work safely. The workers' compensation system becomes another obstacle rather than a solution when injuries occur. Companies have entire departments dedicated to disputing claims and minimizing payouts. That back injury from lifting industrial equipment, they'll argue it was caused by your personal activities. Chemical burns from required cleaning products must be from something you used at home. The legal process takes months or years while you can't work and medical bills accumulate. Return-to-work programs are designed to minimize company liability rather than ensure worker recovery. You might be assigned light duty that still requires the same motions that caused your injury. Modified schedules might reduce your hours and income while not actually reducing the physical demands that damaged your body. The goal is to get you back to work quickly rather than ensure you recover properly. Disability determination becomes a battle against systems designed to deny benefits. Social Security disability requirements are so strict that many injured janitors don't qualify despite being unable to perform the physical demands of their work. Private disability insurance, when available, has exclusions that eliminate coverage for most job-related injuries. Workers who can no longer perform janitorial duties often can't retrain for other work because of age, education, or financial constraints. The most tragic aspect is that these injuries are largely preventable with proper equipment, training, and workplace safety practices. Other industries have reduced injury rates through engineering controls, ergonomic equipment, and safety protocols. But janitorial work continues to operate as if worker injury is an acceptable business cost rather than a preventable tragedy. Age discrimination becomes inevitable as physical capabilities decline from years of occupational damage. Workers in their 50s who've spent decades cleaning buildings find themselves competing with younger workers who haven't yet developed chronic pain and mobility problems. Companies prefer workers who can maintain high productivity standards without accommodation for work-related disabilities. Chapter 20. The Final Breakdown. As we reach the end of this journey through the reality of janitorial work, it's time to confront the most devastating truth of all. This system is working exactly as designed. Every aspect of exploitation, every health hazard, every indignity is not an accident or oversight. It's the logical result of an economic system that requires a permanent underclass to maintain the comfortable environments that everyone else takes for granted. The buildings you've spent your career cleaning will outlast your working life, and probably your natural life. The offices, schools, hospitals, and commercial spaces that you've maintained will continue to function long after your body gives out from the physical demands. But those clean, safe environments will have been paid for with your health, your financial security, and your dignity. You'll retire, if you can call it retirement, with chronic pain that makes daily activities difficult. Your back will never fully recover from decades of heavy lifting and repetitive motions. Your lungs will carry the permanent damage from chemical exposure. Your joints will ache with every weather change, a constant reminder of the work that broke your body down piece by piece. The financial reality of retirement on janitorial wages is stark. Social Security benefits based on a lifetime of minimum wage work won't cover basic living expenses. The 401k plans that were never offered or were too expensive to contribute to mean no retirement savings. The health problems caused by occupational hazards will require medical care you can't afford on fixed income. Your family has paid a price for your work that extends beyond just your physical health. Years of shift work have meant missing family dinners, school events, and important moments. The financial stress of poverty wages has created family tensions and limited opportunities for your children. The health problems from occupational exposure affect your ability to be present and active in family life. But here's what society doesn't want to acknowledge. Your work has made everything else possible. Every business deal conducted in clean offices, every surgery performed in sanitized hospitals, every education delivered in maintained schools has depended on the work you've done. The infrastructure of modern life rests on the foundation of cleaning and maintenance work that you've provided. The companies that profited from your labor have built wealth through your poverty wages. The buildings you cleaned have increased in value, while the workers who maintained them have seen their economic position decline. The productivity gains from your efficiency have been captured by owners and shareholders, while workers have received only enough compensation to ensure continued desperation. The clients who enjoyed clean buildings have never had to confront the human cost of maintaining those environments. They've been insulated from the reality of how their comfortable workspaces are created and maintained. The true cost of cleaning services has been hidden through labor exploitation rather than reflected in honest pricing that would provide living wages. Educational institutions that you've cleaned have trained the next generation without discussing the essential workers who maintain their facilities. Business schools that prepare future executives never examine the labor practices that make their case studies possible. Medical schools train doctors in facilities maintained by workers who can't afford healthcare themselves. The COVID-19 pandemic briefly highlighted the essential nature of cleaning work, but the recognition was temporary and symbolic rather than substantive. Essential worker became a feel-good label that didn't translate into essential compensation or essential protections. The applause was nice, but it didn't pay medical bills or provide job security. Policymakers who rely on clean government buildings to conduct their work have consistently voted against legislation that would improve conditions for the workers who maintain their offices. Labor protections, minimum wage increases, and healthcare access improvements are debated in buildings cleaned by people who would benefit from these policies, but have no political voice to advocate for them. The next generation of janitors is already being recruited from the same vulnerable populations: immigrants seeking opportunity, people with criminal records trying to rebuild their lives, students working their way through school, and anyone else who needs immediate employment despite poor conditions. The cycle continues because the system produces enough desperate workers to maintain labor exploitation. But perhaps the most heartbreaking reality is that this work could be dignified and fairly compensated without fundamentally changing how buildings are cleaned. The technology exists, the knowledge exists, and the resources exist to provide living wages, safe working conditions, and career advancement opportunities. What's missing is the political will to require companies to treat essential workers as human beings rather than disposable resources. The clean buildings, safe learning environments, and sanitized healthcare facilities that define modern American life are not just maintained by janitors, they're subsidized by janitor poverty, janitor health problems, and janitor social invisibility. Every clean surface represents a worker who was paid less than their labor was worth. Every safe building represents someone who risked their safety to maintain it. And tomorrow night, another shift will begin. Workers will arrive at buildings across America, carrying the weight of impossible schedules, poverty wages, and occupational hazards. They'll create clean, safe environments for people who will never know their names or acknowledge their contribution. They'll do essential work while being treated as inessential people, Because that's what essential workers do in America. They show up. They do the work that makes everything else possible, and they remain invisible while society functions around them. The buildings are clean, the systems work, and everyone can pretend that dignity and fair compensation aren't necessary for the people who make it all possible. The janitor's shift ends, but the system that created these conditions continues. And unless something fundamental changes about how America values essential work and essential workers, this story will repeat itself tomorrow night, and the night after that. And for as long as we need buildings to be clean but refuse to acknowledge the people who clean them, the mop is put away, the chemicals are stored, and the invisible workforce fades back into the shadows until tomorrow night, when they'll return to maintain the infrastructure of a society that depends on them completely, while pretending they don't exist at all. And now you know why you wouldn't last a single day. Not because the work itself is impossible, but because the system designed to exploit that work would break your spirit long before it broke your body. The real question isn't whether you could survive one day as a janitor, but whether you can continue to enjoy clean buildings, knowing what it costs the people who maintain them.